My name is Alette Ace. I'm a practicing attorney in Pretoria, South Africa. In this episode, I would like to speak about the criminal law doctrine of common purpose. When I was reading up about common purpose, I found an excellent blog entry from one of my colleagues. I'm going to try and pronounce his name. Advocate Lethlogonolo Mokgoroane. And the blog entry is on a forum called Medium. So I've taken bits and pieces from this blog entry. It's all his words, it's not my words. And I cannot say it better. So I thought, let me rather refer to an existing entry on common purpose that also incorporates a very recent constitutional court judgment, rather than trying to explain it myself. So all credit to my colleague. Thank you for this wonderful piece. Advocate Mokgoroane wrote this blog entry on Medium on 16 December 2019, and I'm going to read bits and pieces. It's 5 pages in total, so it's not that long, so bear with me. Let's see. On 11 December 2019, the Constitutional Court handed down a historic, monumental judgment that is a milestone for rape and gender-based violence. The main question was whether common purpose applies to the common law definition of rape. What is the doctrine of common purpose, you may ask? The doctrine of common purpose is where two or more persons agree to commit a crime by prior agreement, either expressed or implied, or where there is no prior agreement by actively associating in the committing of the crime. The facts of this case began more than 20 years ago, one late night in September 1998. On that fateful night, a group of men went on a rampage in a township east of Johannesburg. The group of men raped 8 women. Some of the men raped these women more than once. The victims knew their perpetrators. While the rapes were committed, some men stood outside to be on the lookout. In the weeks that followed, these men were apprehended and charged. In August of 1999, they appeared before the High Court. In the High Court, the main issue was whether these men could be found guilty of the common law crime of rape on the basis of the doctrine of common purpose. The applicants argued that the common law crime of rape is not an offence for which an individual can be convicted through the application of the doctrine of common purpose. This argument was rejected by the High Court. It held that the doctrine of common purpose applies. The trial eventually came to an end, and the applicants were convicted and sentenced to effective life sentences. Separately, in 2012, Mr. Petu, who was cause accused number 7, was granted leave to appeal his conviction and sentenced to a full court of the High Court. Importantly, the High Court full bench held that the doctrine of common purpose cannot be applied to crimes that can be committed only through the instrumentality of a person's own body or part thereof, and not through the instrumentality of another. Consequently, the full bench of the High Court found that Mr. Petu was an accomplice and not a co-accused, and changed his conviction to one of being an accomplice, and sentenced him to 1 term of life imprisonment only. The Supreme Court of Appeal disagreed with the full court of the High Court judgment and held that to convict the appellant on the basis of his mere presence is to subvert the principles of participation and liability as an accomplice in our criminal law. The appeal court further reasoned that there was no evidence to prove that Mr. Petu was present at the scene of violence where the rapes occurred. Mr. Petu then took his matter to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court had more than one judgment, but I will basically quote from the main judgment as my colleague has in the blog entry. Rape has survived as long as it has because it works to keep patriarchy intact. It communicates clearly who matters and who is disposable. Those who matter are not afraid of being raped because they have been taught safety. Rape is the communication of patriarchal power reigning in, enforcing submission and punishing defiance. It is an extreme act of submission, aggression and of power, always gendered and always enacted against the feminine. The feminine may not always be embodied in a woman's body. It can be enacted against a child of any gender, a man who is considered inappropriately masculine, and any gender non-conforming people. And this was quoted from a piece which you may find in the judgment itself. The main judgment in reaching its decision elaborated on the relationship between rape and power. The court held that to characterize rape simply as an act of a man inserting his genitalia into a woman's genitals is unsustainable. The Constitutional Court further highlighted that in cases of gang rape, as is the case in this case, the presence of a group of men results in power and dominance. Moreover, the main judgment affirmed that rape is not merely a crime of sex. It is also about the perpetuation of patriarchy and rape culture. The main judgment concluded that agreeing with applicants that the doctrine of common purpose does not apply would do a grave injustice to direct and indirect victims of gender-based violence. The inapplicability of the doctrine of common purpose would, as the court concluded, give power to men or perpetrators who rape women with the knowledge that the doctrine does not apply. In rejecting the main argument about instrumentality in the context of rape, the main judgment of the Constitutional Court held that there is no reason why the use of one's body should be determinative in the case of rape, but not in the case of other crimes such as murder and assault. Further, the main judgment held that instrumentality has no place in our society founded upon the Bill of Rights, as it is obsolete and must be discarded, as it's founded on patriarchal norms which treated women as chattels. Additionally, the court held that instrumentality ignores the fact that rape can be committed by more than one person. In terms of the doctrine of common purpose, the main judgment held that its main purpose is to overcome an otherwise unjust result, which offends the legal convictions of the community by removing the element of causation from criminal liability and replacing it in appropriate circumstances with imputing the deed which caused the death or other crimes to all the other co-perpetrators. The main judgment found that the applicants knowingly participated in the activities of the group and fully associated themselves with this criminality. Therefore, there is no reason to treat the ones who penetrated the women differently to the ones who did not. The court found that the perpetrators were all complicit and acted in cahoots. The main judgment spoke about the role of courts in fighting against the scourge of gender-based violence. The main judgment stated that the Constitutional Court and other courts, by extension, would be failing in its duty if it does not send out a clear and unequivocal pronouncement that the South African judiciary is committed to developing and implementing sound and robust legal principles that advance the fight against gender-based violence in order to safeguard the constitutional values of equality, human dignity, and safety and security. This is a very good example of how common purpose applies and how the highest court in our country applied this even to a crime such as rape, where someone would imagine that the physical perpetration is crucial to actually find someone guilty. Thank you so much for this very interesting blog entry, and thank you so much for tuning in and listening. This is a very heavy and serious topic, but it explains how common purpose works in criminal law. It's an excellent example, it's a real life example, it's a Constitutional Court judgment. I do not think there's a much better example. And have a lovely weekend. Next week we'll do a